Hey everyone, and welcome back to the Aether Hub. I'm Simon, bringing you another Magic the Gathering video. I did a poll over on my community tab here on YouTube asking if you guys, the Vorthos army, would be down for me covering every new legendary creature brought to us in Commander Legends. Overwhelmingly, you guys said yes, meaning you just gave me a lot more work to do, but either way, I'm super excited to cover all these great characters, some of which are getting cards for the very first time, and while these may be shorter videos, I hope you guys enjoyed them all the same. Now of course, that being said, Commander Legends introduces a lot of new characters with very limited lore to them, or other side characters who are very briefly mentioned in the story. I'm gonna likely do a compilation of those characters, just to avoid making like a 2-minute long video on a very obscure character, but for some of the bigger, more lore significant characters, like the topic of today's video, we'll take a deeper look into their stories. Today we're looking at a major character way back in the story of Lorwyn, one of my personal favorite sets of all time that, to this day, we've only visited once so far. While this is the first ever card printed for this character, make no mistake, they played a major role in the history of Lorwyn. Let's take a look at the story of Colfenor, the Last U. And before we get into the video, if you're enjoying the content, make sure you leave this video a like, comment, and subscribe, and make sure you check out the link in the description below to support us over on Patreon. Now, back to the lore. Colfenor the Last U is a 3/7 legendary treefolk shaman for 3 generic, 1 white, 1 black, and 1 green mana. Whenever Colfenor the Last U or another creature you control dies, return up to 1 other target creature card with lesser toughness from your graveyard to your hand. Being a tree boy, he of course has reach, but also, strangely, vigilance. As we get into Colfenor's story, we'll circle back to how that lore has impacted this card's design. Colfenor is a treefolk, or U-folk, from the plane of Lorwyn. A long-lived species, treefolk are known to be steady, level-headed, and patient, and Colfenor was no different. While some species of treefolk, those much younger than the ancient species of Red U that Colfenor hails from, would stress about the events of the day, this old sage practiced his people's ancient ways, magic, and lore. Sadly, on the plane of Lorwyn, his people, the Red U's, are slow to reproduce and grow, meaning that Colfenor is the last of his kind. Being a shaman, his people over the generations entrusted him with all of their culture's ancient history and writings. Colfenor became the sole collector of the U-folk's great wisdom and traditions, even as his people faded to history. Thus, he swore to pass on their legacy to the future. In a sense, he got what he was looking for in the young pupil of the non-treefolk variety, an elf from the Glintleaf tribe named Rise. As a youngster, Rise was always captivated with the forests of Lorwyn and its deep secrets. In exploring these lands, Rise discovered the ancient U Colfenor, who quickly took up the elf as a student, someone he believed he could pass his people's teachings down to. In particular, Colfenor taught Rise his people's shamanistic form of poison magic. It's why Colfenor the Last U has black in its mana cost. His people are really connected to this strange type of poison magic that Rise quickly picked up on and mastered despite it being an illegal type of dark magic that his clan forbid. Colfenor, being as ancient and knowledgeable as he is super in tune with the world. Lorwyn was his life force, its history was his history, and likewise was its future. As such, Colfenor felt a great disturbance in Lorwyn. A great event was about to take place that would change everything. And in this prophecy, Colfenor felt his own impending death. The end of his species and all of their U traditions would certainly come to an end, so he enacted a plan to carry that history on even after his death. Of course, this feeling was the Great Aurora. If you're not familiar with Lorwyn and its history, here's a quick little recap. Lorwyn is a strange world because every, 1,000 years or so, an event known as the Great Aurora takes place. It's a mystical force, a natural event that overtakes Lorwyn and changes it. Lorwyn is changed to Shadowmoor, the dark reflection of what once was a peaceful world. As Lorwyn is changed over to Shadowmoor, and eventually vice versa, its denizens are turned and twisted into darker, more brutal versions of themselves. Rather than fun-loving and adventurous, Kithkins would become isolated and distrusting. Fairies go from playful sprites to malevolent tormentors. With this flip, the people had no recollections of their former lives or personalities, and once Lorwyn returned, they would again no longer recall their time in this darker version of their world. It's truly one of the most unique aspects to a plane throughout the entire multiverse. But, for the first time, Colfenor was able to anticipate it and prepare for its coming, though never really truly grasping what this great aurora was. As he realized his death was imminent with this great change, Colfenor again entrusted in his friend Rise. The young elf, now banished and pursued by his former Glintleaf tribe, was instructed to take a seed cone Colfenor had plucked from his own branches and plant it in a sacred Ufolk region known as Murmuring Bosque, a place of great importance for his people. Colfenor infused this seed with his essence, phrasing, hoping that his knowledge would transfer to whatever sapling would emerge in the soil of his people. Before the Great Aurora occurred, Rise was able to travel to the Murmuring Bosque, but found that this ancient land had been essentially burned to the ground. Despite the absence of life, Rise planted the seed just as Colfenor had asked. Still, Shadowmoor was fastly approaching, but before the Dark World emerged, one of Rise's allies, the Flamekin Ashling, accidentally caused the death of Colfenor. Now, this starts to get into the main story of Lorwyn/Shadowmoor, which you can find more of linked below or on your screen right now. But for the purposes of this video, just know that Ashling accidentally lit Colfenor on fire, causing the death of this great and ancient Yew, just as he had predicted. As the Great Aurora changed Lorwyn over to Shadowmoor, a new character emerged from the seed cone of Colfenor, a being known only as the Sapling. This was a more female-esque build of a red yew sapling. Still, it's a different tree folk than Colfenor. But his plan did seem to work, as the sapling now retained all of their people's history, knowledge, and wisdom. More importantly, Colfenor's memory and insight on the Great Aurora that was coming was also transferred over to the sapling, meaning that she was able to retain her typical personality despite Shadowmoor's transformative magic. This was all part of Colfenor's plan, as he believed that this great change was actually nefarious in nature, and not natural as it had been before. And he was right. The Fae Una had manipulated the energy of Lorwyn to bring about Shadowmoor far earlier than its natural cycle. In this dark world, with Una also retaining her memories and personality, the Queen of the Fae looked to rule over all. The sapling, this offspring of Colfenor, grouped up with other characters to defeat Una and bring back Lorwyn. And that is the pretty simple breakdown of Colfenor the Last Yew's story. But how does this lore impact the card's design? Well, outside of the Evergreen text, which basically just says he's a walking tree, this card's ability is heavily influenced by Colfenor's story. Just like the seed cone Colfenor used to ensure the history of his people lived on after his death, this card's ability allows you to bring back a slightly weaker card, in a sense back to life, from your graveyard. Funnily enough, while Colfenor himself hadn't received a card until Commander Legends, the sapling who he had passed everything on to actually did have a printing. And just look at that stat line, one less strength and toughness than Colfenor, fitting perfectly with Colfenor the Last Yew's ability and his story. Anyway guys, that's going to do it for this video on the life, history, and design of Colfenor the Last Yew. Now I want you to let me know in the comments how you plan to use this card in a commander deck. Of course, if you enjoyed the video, make sure you show your support by leaving a like, subscribing, and taking that notification bell so you never miss out on a new video. You can also check out all the great perks you can get by supporting us over on Patreon. Find that link in the description below. As always guys, thank you all so much for watching, and until next time, see ya!